What is going on? Welcome back to the Cryptolabs YouTube channel. My name is Colin, and today I want to be talking to you about something a little bit different. Now, usually on this channel, I talk a lot about my treasury flywheel looping system, which is basically a way for me to leverage DeFi protocols and using DeFi activities to help me fund my treasury portfolio. And usually in those strategies, we have a treasury of assets that we want to hold long term, and then using those assets to produce cash flow vehicles that can then further build that treasury account. But today I want to be talking to you about a little bit different of a strategy, which is a retirement plan, right? And I think a lot of people who get exposure to this space, they can see the amount of cash flow that can be created, and they think, oh my gosh, I can retire next month if I do this. And that's a great goal. And I genuinely believe that we should be taking the time in our lives to do the things that mean the most to us. And unfortunately, the reality is a lot of people are working jobs or in careers that are just not really fulfilling to them. It's not really serving a greater purpose. And so I work a lot with our fast track clients, which is our coaching program and mastermind, on just this. It's dialing in what is the goal, what is the actual mission that you're on. And for some of those folks, it is, hey, I want to retire. I'm getting closer to retirement age. I don't want to be doing this career forever. I want to create a bridge so that my DeFi portfolio can help me, pay bills or fund my lifestyle. And so the approach that I take with those clients is a little bit different than my accumulation, long-term building of the treasury type clients, right? And I wanted to walk through that cash flow plan today. Now, I'm a visual guy, and so if you've seen any of my videos or if you're in the UIG, you know that I'm a visual guy. So I like to have a nice visual map, a Miro board here that can really walk us through what this strategy may look like. And I don't want to get too tactical. This is definitely going to be some tactical things that I'm going to be talking through, but I don't want you to get in the weeds on the how-to. I really just want you to think about, is this strategy or is this approach something that you want to adapt in your own portfolio? So again, don't get bogged down with the intricacies. If you want a part two, I can certainly do that for you. But today, let's just zoom out and see how could we structure this from a mindset perspective, but also from a tactical system perspective that can actually help us bridge that gap to what you may deem to be a retirement. Okay, one of the mindset pieces, and then I talk to a lot of folks about who want this as their goal, is that I don't want you to rely on going far out on the risk curve to hit these targets. Okay, say that in a little bit different way is this space can be extremely lucrative, but can also be extremely risky depending on how much of that risk you take on. And so for people that are, dare I say, relying on the cash flow or on the income from their DeFi portfolio, I do not want them to move far out on the risk curve. Because the farther out we go on the risk curve, the greater risk we take on, which means that you may get burned along the way. And I have many stories in which I have burned myself, and this was self-inflicting wounds, where I moved farther out on the risk curve than I previously had liked to, and then got burned, and I, lesson learned. But if you're needing the cash flow, if you're relying on this cash flow to come in, we need to make sure that we're taking as little risk as we can and make sure that we are, following all the security measures and just making sure we're keeping our golden goose safe and secure so that it can continue to produce those golden eggs. Okay, now let's get a little bit more tactical. So this Miro board, again, is a visual map of a strategy or of a system that you can use. And in the UIG, we have a bunch of templates that you can use, whether it be for cash flow or whether it be for your a treasury building system. And so if you're in the UIG and you haven't seen that, just shoot me a message and I can definitely send you the link. But ultimately, what this is, actually, I still had this for my. Let me change that real quick. I was using this as my other thing right here, to create cash flow system that pays for monthly bills. Okay, so the mission at the top here is all about your goals, right? So we really need to define exactly what we're trying to achieve. And so I have right here, goal number one, based on this, is to create a cash flow system that pays for my monthly bills, right? And next thing we need to do is really define what does that actually look like. And so if you haven't done this yet, make sure to go through your traditional financial statements and your expenses and your bills and just write everything down and figure out what is that dollar target, right? And so for me, I wrote down here, my monthly cash flow target is $3,500 per month in USDC or in cash flow and from rewards from cash flow vehicles. Then I wrote down a little bit farther is, hey, well, what's my target APR? All right. And so that target APR has to do, it's a little bit of math here, but it has to do with, well, what's realistic, number one, in the low risk activities in DeFi. Number two, it's about looking at how much capital you have to deploy, and then how much you need on a monthly basis. And then you could sort of reverse engineer it to be like, this is my target return percentage. And then you can compare that to what is realistic, right? So if you were to look at those two figures and let's say it pops back, you need to average 250% APR to hit the target. Maybe it's a great goal, and don't change the goal necessarily, but maybe that target is a little far out, or if it's possible, but you'd have to go super far out on the risk curve, and you risk the initial capital that you're starting with. And so anyways, hopefully that makes sense. So take the amount of capital that you have that you want to deploy, the amount of cash flow you need to produce, and then reverse engineer that to, okay, if all of this capital was in and I wanted to produce this, what's that target APR percentage here? And again, if it's too far out, well, then maybe we got to get the boat closer to the dock kind of a thing. And, I could certainly help you with that. Or it just means we need to adjust our expectations. But let's just say I have a bunch of capital that I want to deploy into, cash flowing liquidity pools. My target is $3,500 per month, which means that if I can average 46% APR, I would be able to hit that cash flow goal. Let's just say. So that's my target. Those are my kind of KPIs that I want to be tracking over time. Now, let's get a little bit more tactical. One of the things that I suggest to members and investors who want to use their portfolios for cash flow is to have a buffer. It is to have a buffer, what I call like a savings account. And the way I view this is, it's the savings account that you are continuously adding to every single day, every single week, every single month. And then when you need the cash flow to be withdrawn, you can take it from that account. So tactically, let's look at this here. So actually, I'll say it like this too, because maybe this will land a little bit better. I sometimes find that people who are needing the cash flow and are extracting fees directly from the liquidity pool and moving it directly to their, to their account, their bank account to pay for bills, it can be really stressful when managing the liquidity pools, right? Give you an example. If you're out of range in a liquidity pool, you're no longer producing cash flow. And so those who are on a daily basis trying to extract fees from this liquidity pool, if you go out of range for 24, 48 hours, that could be a really stressful event. And it can almost force you to rebalance prematurely and locking in a bunch of impermanent loss when you maybe didn't need to do that. So what I would recommend in this situation is to have a buffer lending account of USDC. Okay, what I mean by that is I would have at least, if you can do this, at least 1 month's buffer of USDC lent in a lending platform. That'll be earning 3 to 7% APR, and it will just keep compounding on itself. And that is used as that buffer savings account that you can extract from to pay your bills. That way, you're not stressed about trying to extract fees from every single liquidity pool to pay the bills. You can just pull it from the supply, the supply account on your lending platform whenever you need it. All the while, as you're collecting fees from your liquidity pool, you are claiming them, and I can have it right here, the target cash flow, claim rewards every Friday, and then once a month withdraw what you needed from your lent position to pay for the bills, right? So every single day, or not every single day, but once a week or however often you claim your rewards, convert that into USDC and then lend it to that savings account, and that will accrue, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger as you add more USDC to it from your LP positions. And then whenever you need to pay for those bills, you can just dip into this account, withdraw, pay for your bills, and go forward. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that's a really important middle step that some people who need the cash flow skip, and it just adds a lot of unnecessary pressure or stress to manage the liquidity pool position. So hopefully that makes sense. The other thing that I would encourage you to think about as well is that if you need the cash flow, it's all very easy when prices are moving sideways, the market's moving sideways, or when the market is moving up, right? If market's moving up, that means dollar value of the underlying assets are going up. It's very easy to manage a DeFi portfolio when that's happening. It gets really challenging when the market is going down or when there's a big dip. And so you have to understand that our liquidity pool positions here are long vehicles, which means that they are going to lose dollar value if the underlying assets are going down in price. So let's give an example. If I'm an ETH USDC or a Bitcoin USDC or even like a Sol wrapped Bitcoin pool, if those assets, those underlying assets are going down in dollar value, the liquidity pool is also going to go down in value. And so we don't want to lose value in our golden egg here. We want to, or excuse me, the golden goose. We want to try to maintain the golden goose the best way we can, so that it can continue to produce the golden eggs that we can extract and add to this savings buffer account. The way that I would approach this, and this is a little bit more advanced and complex, but we're starting to talk about this a lot more inside the UIG, is that we want to have a separate capital, a separate account here to create a short position to hedge our liquidity pools. Now, again, this gets way more advanced, and this video is not necessarily for that specifically, but if you like that, just let me know in the comments, and I can work on creating that for you. But I think it's really important to have separate capital on the sidelines to potentially hedge our liquidity pools, so that if the dollar value of the underlying assets goes down, the liquidity pools can keep producing the cash flow, but the short position will help us, maintain the value of our original portfolio, right? So again, the short or the hedge over here is used as an insurance policy to keep the value of our original portfolio roughly the same. Because if we did not do this, like let's say we were to just not ignore the shorting and the hedging aspect of this, if I'm just naked long in these liquidity pools, if the dollar value of these drop, the value of my liquidity pools are going to drop, and the cash flow is also going to drop, because I'm going to have less capital in the liquidity pools to produce that same cash flow. And also during a bear market, we tend to notice that cash flow is not as vibrant. It's not as big as it could be during the bull cycle. So these are a bunch of things that I want you to start to consider and start to master in terms of skill sets, so that you can prepare yourself and build out the system, so that when the time comes and the bear market starts to happen, which it will, it's going to happen, that we are prepared to hedge or protect the value of our liquidity pools. Now, again, that's a little bit more complex, but inside the UIG, I call it a movie, honestly, because it's like 46 minutes long, but it's an entire guide to hedging your liquidity pool position. So hopefully all this makes sense. Hopefully this was valuable. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below, or if you have any, future video ideas, don't hesitate to drop those as well, because I'm always looking for ways to provide more value to you here on the YouTube channel. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll talk soon. Peace.